Diolch Tipper Lewid, and thanks, Minister, for your statement today. We did have an inquiry on the problems of homelessness and rough sleeping on the Communities Committee last year, and as David Melding mentioned, in many cases it is a complex picture, and you alluded to this in your statement today. So sometimes it needs complex and cross-cutting approaches to solve these problems. And I was heartened by your references to the approach in Wrexham, which obviously you'll need to monitor how that how the outcomes pan out. But it seems that you do often need some sort of cross-cutting approach, and that may well be what they're doing with their community care hub. So that might be some example that perhaps we can draw on when we look at this across the breadth of Wales. Now, one visible issue that we have witnessed recently is the increase in people living in tents in urban centres, which is becoming a controversial issue. Now, clearly, people would seem to be better off in tents than living outside exposed to the elements. That would appear to be clear, but I think we do need to be mindful that people within the housing sector have raised issues over this, with the potential problem that what appears to be a short-term solution of living in a tent might turn into a long-term solution and might actually deter people in the long run from seeking more viable long-term housing solutions. So people in organisations like the Woolwich are raising issues over this. I think we need to investigate why sometimes people are more willing to live in tents rather than seek shelter, at the overnight shelters. Now, there is some anecdotal evidence from the recent media reports, and some of the people that have been interviewed, some of the homeless people living in the tents, have pointed out that sometimes the overnight shelters are not as attractive for them as living in a tent, and sometimes they find the situations that they're in an overnight shelter are not that safe. So I think we do have to try and work out how to make it more viable for people to actually be housed in the overnight shelter. And I think drug use is becoming an issue. There is some evidence that the longer people stay homeless, the harder it is for them to reintegrate and to be exploited on the streets by drug peddlers. And actually many of the people that are in the tents, the ones that have been quoted, seem to be saying that one of the reasons they don't want to go into the overnight shelters is to avoid interaction with drug users, but actually if they stay in the tents, there is some evidence that they could end up getting involved with drug users even against their own wishes. So these are complex problems, and I appreciate that the solutions are not always that easy. I think there is some evidence that rough sleeping in Scotland, the figures may have stabilised, so I wonder if there are lessons we can learn from their approach there. And some people have also noted that a lot of charities, possibly on occasion, seem to be competing against each other. And can we work to ensure that the charities do work together to help to resolve these issues? Diolch yn fawr.